In the process of setting electoral districts, gerrymandering is a practice intended to establish a political advantage for a particular party or group by manipulating district boundaries. The resulting district is known as a gerrymander. However, that word can also refer to the process. The term gerrymandering has negative connotations. In addition to its use achieving desired electoral results for a particular party, gerrymandering may be used to help hinder a particular demographic, such as a political, ethnic, racial, linguistic, religious, or class group, such as in U.S. federal voting district boundaries that produce a majority of constituents representative of African American or other racial minorities, known as majority-minority districts. Gerrymandering can also be used to protect incumbents. Difference from malapportionment. Gerrymandering should not be confused with malapportionment, whereby the number of eligible voters per elected representative can vary widely without relation to how the boundaries are drawn. Nevertheless, the tilde-mander suffix has been applied to particular malapportionments. Sometimes political representatives use both gerrymandering and malapportionment to try to maintain power. Etymology. The word gerrymander was used for the first time in the Boston Gazette on 26 March 1812. The word was created in reaction to a redrawing of Massachusetts State Senate election districts under Governor Elbridge Gerry. In 1812, Governor Gerry signed a bill that redistricted Massachusetts to benefit his Democratic-Republican Party. When mapped, one of the contorted districts in the Boston area was said to resemble the shape of a salamander. The original gerrymander and original 1812 gerrymander cartoon depict the Essex South State Senatorial District for the legislature of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Gerrymander is a portmanteau of the governor's last name and the word salamander. The redistricting was a notable success, although in the 1812 election both the Massachusetts House and governorship were won by Federalists by a comfortable margin and cost Gerry his job. The redistricted state Senate remained firmly in Democratic-Republican hands. The author of the term gerrymander may never be definitively established. Historians widely believe that the Federalist newspaper editors Nathan Hale and Benjamin and John Russell coined the term, but the historical record does not have definitive evidence as to who created or uttered the word for the first time. Appearing with the term, and helping spread and sustain its popularity, was a political cartoon depicting a strange animal with claws, wings and a dragon-like head satirizing the map of the oddly shaped district. This cartoon was most likely drawn by Elkanah Tisdale, an early 19th century painter, designer, and engraver who was living in Boston at the time. Tisdale had the engraving skills to cut the wood blocks to print the original cartoon. These wood blocks survive and are preserved in the Library of Congress. The word gerrymander was reprinted numerous times in Federalist newspapers in Massachusetts, New England, and nationwide during the remainder of 1812. This suggests some organized activity of the Federalists to disparage Governor Gerry in particular, and the growing Democratic-Republican Party in general. Gerrymandering soon began to be used to describe not only the original Massachusetts example, but also other cases of district shape manipulation for partisan gain in other states. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word's acceptance was marked by its publication in a dictionary and in an encyclopedia. Since the letter G of the eponymous Gerry is pronounced, as in go, the word gerrymander was originally pronounced rymander. However, pronunciation as gerrymander with a d, as in gentle, has become the accepted pronunciation. From time to time, other names are given the mander suffix to tie a particular effort to a particular politician or group. These include the 1852 Henrymandering, gerrymander, and perrymander. Voting systems. Gerrymandering is used most often in favor of ruling incumbents or a specific political party, the one drawing the map. Societies whose legislatures use a single winner voting system are the most likely to have political parties that gerrymander for advantage. Most notably, gerrymandering is particularly effective in non-proportional systems that tend towards fewer parties, such as first-past-the-post. In proportional election systems, where political parties are represented in proportion to the total numbers of votes they receive, gerrymandering has little or less significance. Some countries, such as Australia, Canada, and the UK, authorize non-partisan organizations to set constituency boundaries in an attempt to prevent gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is most common in countries where elected politicians are responsible for defining constituency boundaries. They have an obvious and immediate interest in the outcome of the process. Gerrymandering tactics. The primary goals of gerrymandering are to maximize the effect of supporters' votes and to minimize the effect of opponents' votes. These can be accomplished through a number of ways. Cracking involves spreading voters of a particular type among many districts in order to deny them a sufficiently large voting bloc in any particular district. An example would be to split the voters in an urban area among several districts wherein the majority of voters are suburban, on the presumption that the two groups would vote differently, and the suburban voters would be far more likely to get away in the elections. Packing is to concentrate as many voters of one type into a single electoral district to reduce their influence in other districts. In some cases, this may be done to obtain representation for a community of common interest, rather than to dilute that interest over several districts to a point of ineffectiveness. When the party controlling the districting process has a statewide majority, packing is usually not necessarily to attain partisan advantage. The minority party can generally be cracked everywhere. Packing is therefore more likely to be used for partisan advantage when the party controlling the districting process has a statewide minority, because by forfeiting a few districts packed with the opposition, cracking can be used in forming the remaining districts. Hijacking redraws two districts in such a way as to force two incumbents of the same political party to run against each other in one district, ensuring that one of them will be eliminated, while usually leaving the other district to be won by someone from a different political party. Kidnapping aims to move areas where a certain elected official has significant support to another district, making it more difficult to win future elections with a new electorate. This is often employed against politicians who represent multiple urban areas, in which larger cities will be removed from the district in order to make the district more rural. These tactics are typically combined in some form, creating a few forfeit seats for packed voters of one type in order to secure more seats and greater representation for voters of another type. This results in candidates of one party winning by small majorities in most of the districts, and another party winning by a large majority in only a few of the districts. Effect. Gerrymandering is effective because of the wasted vote effect. By moving geographic boundaries, the incumbent party packs opposition voters into a few districts they will already win, wasting those extra votes. Remaining districts are more tightly constructed, with the opposition party allowed a bare minority count. These districts constitute the majority of districts and are drawn to produce a result favoring the incumbent party. While the wasted vote effect is strongest when a party wins by narrow margins across multiple districts, gerrymandering narrow margins can be risky when voters are less predictable. To minimize the risk of demographic or political shifts swinging a district to the opposition, politicians can create more packed districts, leading to more comfortable margins in unpacked ones. Effects of gerrymandering. Effect on electoral competition. Some political science research suggests that, contrary to common belief, gerrymandering does not decrease electoral competition, and can even increase it. Some say that, rather than packing the voters of the party into uncompetitive districts, party leaders tend to prefer to spread the party's voters into multiple districts, so that the party can win a larger number of races in the box. This may lead to increased competition. Instead of gerrymandering, some researchers find that other factors, such as partisan polarization and the incumbency advantage, have driven the recent decreases in electoral competition. Similarly, a 2009 study found that congressional polarization is primarily a function of the differences in how Democrats and Republicans represent the same district rather than a function of which districts each party represents of the distribution of constituency preferences. These findings are, however, a matter of some dispute. While gerrymandering may not decrease electoral competition in all cases, there are certainly instances where gerrymandering does reduce such competition. One state in which gerrymandering has arguably had an adverse effect on electoral competition is California. In 2000, a bipartisan redistricting effort redrew congressional district lines in ways that all but guaranteed incumbent victories. As a result, California saw only one congressional seat change hands between 2000 and 2010. In response to this obvious gerrymandering, a 2010 referendum in California gave the power to redraw congressional district lines to the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, which had been created to draw California state Senate and Assembly districts by another referendum in 2008. In stark contrast to the redistricting efforts that followed the 2000 census, the Redistricting Commission has created a number of the most competitive congressional districts in the country, increased incumbent advantage and campaign costs. The effect of gerrymandering for incumbents is particularly advantageous, as incumbents are far more likely to be re-elected under conditions of gerrymandering. For example, in 2002, according to political scientists Norman Ornstein and Thomas Mann, only 4 challengers were able to defeat incumbent members of the U.S. Congress, the lowest number in modern American history. Incumbents are likely to be of the majority party orchestrating a gerrymander, and incumbents are usually easily renominated in subsequent elections, including incumbents among the minority. Mann, a senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institution, has also noted that redistricting is a deeply political process, with incumbents actively seeking to minimize the risk to themselves to gain additional seats for the party. The bipartisan gerrymandering that Mann mentions refers to the fact that legislators often also draw distorted legislative districts even when such redistricting does not provide an advantage to the party. Gerrymandering of state legislative districts can effectively guarantee an incumbent's victory by shoring up a district with higher levels of partisan support, without disproportionately benefiting a particular political party. This can be highly problematic from a governance perspective, because forming districts to ensure high levels of partisanship often leads to higher levels of partisanship in legislative bodies. If a substantial number of districts are designed to be polarized, then those districts' representation will also likely act in a heavily partisan manner, which can create and perpetuate partisan gridlock. This demonstrates that gerrymandering can have a deleterious effect on the principle of democratic accountability, with uncompetitive districts reducing the fear that incumbent politicians may lose office. They have less incentive to represent the interests of the constituents, even when those interests conform to majority support for an issue across the electorate as a whole. Incumbent politicians may look out more more for their party's interests than for those of the constituents. Gerrymandering can affect campaign costs for district elections. If districts become increasingly stretched out, candidates must pay increased costs for transportation and trying to develop and present campaign advertising across a district. The incumbent's advantage in securing campaign funds is another benefit of his or her having a gerrymandered secure seat. Less descriptive representation. Gerrymandering also has significant effects on the representation received by voters in gerrymandered districts. Because gerrymandering can be designed to increase the number of wasted votes among the electorate, the relative representation of particular groups can be drastically altered from their actual share of the voting population. This effect can significantly prevent a gerrymandered system from achieving proportional and descriptive representation, as the winners of elections are increasingly determined by who is drawing the districts rather than the preferences of the voters. Gerrymandering may be advocated to improve representation within the legislature among otherwise underrepresented minority groups by packing them into a single district. This can be controversial as it may lead to those groups remaining marginalized in the government as they become confined to a single district. Candidates outside the district no longer need to represent them to win elections. As an example, much of the redistricting conducted in the United States in the early 1990s involved the intentional creation of additional majority-minority districts where racial minorities such as African Americans were packed into the majority. This maximization policy drew support by both the Republican Party and by minority representatives elected as Democrats from these constituencies, who then had safe seats. The 2012 election provides a number of examples as to how partisan gerrymandering can adversely affect the descriptive function of states as congressional delegations. In Pennsylvania, for example, Democratic candidates for the House of Representatives received 83,000 more votes than Republican candidates, yet the Republican-controlled redistricting process in 2010 resulted in Democrats losing to the Republican counterparts in 13 out of Pennsylvania's 18 districts. In the 7 states where Republicans had complete control over the redistricting process, Republican House candidates received 16.7 million votes and Democratic House candidates received 16.4 million votes. The redistricting resulted in Republican victories in 73 out of the 107 affected seats. In those 7 states, Republicans received 50.4% of the votes but won in over 68% of the congressional districts. While it is but one example of how gerrymandering can have a significant effect on election outcomes, this kind of disproportional representation of the public will seems to be problematic for the legitimacy of democratic systems, regardless of one's political affiliation. In Michigan, redistricting was constructed by a Republican legislature in 2011. Federal congressional districts were so designed that cities such as Battle Creek, Grand Rapids, Jackson, Kalamazoo, Lansing, and East Lansing were separated into districts with large conservative-leaning hinterlands that essentially diluted the Democratic votes in those cities in congressional elections. Since 2010, not one of those cities is within a district in which a Democratic nominee for the House of Representatives has a reasonable chance of winning, short of Democratic landslide. Incumbent gerrymandering. Gerrymandering can also be done to help incumbents as a whole, effectively turning every district into a packed one and greatly reducing the potential for competitive elections. This is particularly likely to occur when the minority party has significant obstruction power, unable to enact a partisan gerrymander. The legislature instead agrees on ensuring their own mutual re-election. In an unusual occurrence in 2000, for example, the 2 dominant parties in the state of California cooperatively redrew both state and federal legislative districts to preserve the status quo, ensuring the electoral safety of the politicians from unpredictable voting by the electorate. This move proved completely effective, as no state or federal legislative office changed party in the 2004 election, although 53 congressional, 20 state Senate, and 80 state Assembly seats were potentially at risk. In 2006, the term 70/30th District came to signify the equitable split of two evenly split districts. The resulting districts gave each party a guaranteed seat and retained the respective power base. Prison-based gerrymandering. Prison-based gerrymandering occurs in places like New York when prisoners are counted as residents of a particular district, increasing the district's population with non-voters when assigning political apportionment. This phenomenon violates the principle of one person, one vote because, although many prisoners come from urban communities, they are counted as residents of the rural districts that contain large prisons, thereby artificially inflating the political representation in districts with prisons at the expense of voters in all other districts without prisons. Others contend that prisoners should not be counted as residents of their original districts when they do not reside there and are not legally eligible to vote.